talking about the others, okay? Because that's what we're concerned with. So in traditional education, we focus on the product, not so much the environment. I was given a pretty cool analogy by Sir Ken Robinson, who, if you've never heard of him now, you will get sick of hearing him by the end of this presentation because I love him. So he laid this analogy down about agriculture during the Industrial Revolution, during industrialization. And when humans started realizing that we need to grow a ton of food to sustain all of us, natural problems arose immediately, such as like pests and things like that were killing our agriculture, and we weren't allowed to grow as much as we wanted to. So our scientists at the time and our brains at the time looked at it and said, how can we fix this? And they said, well, we need to start spraying stuff on the plant, right? Pesticides come up, and now we see vast amounts of nitrogen in the water, and we see pollution of the ocean, pollution of the atmosphere, all from, well, now we have all of this food, we need to protect this food. How do we do that? Well, we spray the plant. That makes sense, right? And that was working, quote, working, if you weren't thinking about pollution or anything like that. It was working for hundreds of years, and technically today it's still working if you're not worried about pollution or anything like that. And then along came the organic movement and the self-sustainability movement, and they found out very quickly that you don't focus on the plant. You don't add things to the plant, you focus on the soil. You focus on the environment the plant comes up in. And if you take care of the soil, the plant will take care of itself, all right? So that was the analogy it presented to me, and I lay it on to you now because I thought it was brilliant for the atmosphere of education that we have now. We are focused on the product, not the environment. We are focused on the grade. We are focused on the standardized test at the end of the semester. We are focused on the funding. We are focused on classroom sizes. We are focused on the product, the graduate. We are not focused on building the environment to let humans who are natural learners flourish in that ability. So we deal with marginalized youth and educators. I kind of already touched on that. Sometimes we don't think about the marginalized educators. You don't go into education, you don't go into teaching without wanting to make a difference, without having those like warm little fuzzy feelings that I call them. You don't go into education if you don't have those feelings, but sometimes you get into the educational system, and I can attest to this because it happened to me, that I got in there, was teaching the way I was taught to teach, and it was depriving me of all of those intrinsic motivations I had for getting into teaching. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to help the kids that felt like no one was going to help them. I wanted to do those things, and then got in traditional teaching and realized I was kind of stifled a little bit in those things. So not only does traditional education sometimes marginalize youth, but sometimes we don't think that it also marginalizes educators too. And I don't mean to make them the villain, as I said before. So if it turns out, you're taking this as like Matt's hour-long rant on how horrible education is, I don't mean it to come off that way. So a narrow definition and approach concerning intelligence. And Ken Robinson will talk about this far more eloquently than I can now. But when we speak of intelligence, we are learning a vast amount about intelligence within the last couple of years. Multiple intelligence, the idea of neuroplasticity, that the brain can and is always changing depending on the environment, and new information and new things come in, that the actual physiology of the brain changes. So we know all of these things, yet we are still teaching and aiming at a very, very small definition of intelligence. It was put to me that if this is intelligence, if this is everything that human beings are capable of understanding and capable of learning, then traditional high schools measure about this much intelligence. This is book smarts, as we call it. So this is academic intelligence, the way we refer to it now, and that is the only version of intelligence that traditional schools track and are concerned with. As I already talked about, it's the product of industrialization and the factory model, and I don't want to take, because the video I'll show you, you will see what I'm talking about, but he brings up very simple ideas like, why do we educate students in batches? Like, why are they educated based on how old they are? Like, you go to the school because everybody else around that time was born? Like, that's the most that's the thing that is most common between you guys, like, is that, and he calls it the date of manufacture to like even further that factory analogy. He talks about behind classrooms. If you were to homeschool, were any of you homeschooled? Yeah? Okay, so, and tell me if this was your experience. I'm very sorry. I'm sorry. I don't mean to belittle it. But did you work on one subject for like an hour in the kitchen, and then get up and go to the bathroom and work on English for an hour, and then go to like a bedroom and work on science for an hour, and then just keep walking around different rooms of your house, right? Because that makes no sense. Why would you do that? But we do that in a traditional education model. Like, you need to work on math every day for an hour and a half, and then move to your English class, a different class, and work on that for an hour and a half. And if you do this for 4 years, voila, you're educated. But that's crazy. People don't learn that way. No one ever has learned that way. People can learn that way, just like we did with the recycling bin. It's possible, you can learn that way, but it doesn't mean it's your natural inclination or that you're naturally able to do that easily. Not only it might be failing to address youth needs, but it actually also might be actively discouraging the human tendency to learn. And you will hear me say that over and over again, because that's one of the driving factors and things that makes me so passionate about big picture, is that humans, not just youth, specifically youth, but not just youth, are natural born learners. Just because you hit a certain age doesn't mean you shut down your brain. You're like, well, I got my college degree now and I got a job. I don't have to learn anything else. No one does that. We are naturally learners. We are natural learners. We want to know about our environment. We want to know about our world. And the case that I've heard made, and I tend to agree with sometimes, is that not only is our traditional education system not promoting that, but it might be actively discouraging learning, which is very sad. And as I said, not all bad. I don't mean everybody in this room. You know, I can assume, since you're here at Covenant House, I can assume that we are all like-minded people, right? This place, I have referred to this place as like gravitational. Like, I feel like it pulls people of like minds and like hearts and like souls together. So I can assume that everybody in this room, though traditionally educated, you know, found a pretty positive path in life. So I don't mean to just say that traditional education is such a bad thing and, you know, no one should have to deal with that, but we are just talking about our alternatives. So I can talk, if you haven't noticed. I can talk for a very long time.